So data analysis can become quite technical and complicated, and the idea of this module is really not to get into the nitty-gritty of all the technicalities, but rather to simplify the process and the terminology to make it easier and more applicable to teachers and schools. So when you're going through this video clip, don't get too bogged down with the technical side, but rather get an overall impression of the different measures that you can use to draw conclusions. So let's have a look to see what are these different measures. Well, the first is probably the most commonly known or used when we're analyzing data, and that is the mean. And the mean is the average. It's worked out by taking the total results of all the learners and dividing it by the number of learners. So let's look at how to calculate the mean. Well, the first is this set of data that we've got here is we've got 6 learners, numbered 1 to 6, and each of them have a result out of 10. So the first thing we do is we add up the number of learners. In this case, the total is 6. Then we add up the results out of 10, and here we get a total of 30. So to calculate the mean, what you do is you take the 30, which is the total number of results, divide by the number of learners, which is 6, and that gives you 5. So in this case, the mean is 5. This is what we normally call the average. What are the advantages of this? Well, the first is that it's not affected by a few extreme results. So you've got a couple of learners sitting on very, very high results and others on low. It takes all the learners into account. But the problem with calculating the mean is it first doesn't indicate any trends. And secondly, it can be quite misleading. So you need to be careful when using the mean, and again, you need to use it where it's the most applicable. So the next measure to use is what we call the median. Now the median is the middle result. This is worked out by placing all the results in numerical order. If the number of the results is odd, then the median is the middle number. If the number is even, then the two central numbers are added together and divided by 2. Now let's look at this in practice. So we take the same set of results as we had before. The only difference is now you'll notice that it doesn't go down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 for the number of for the learners. It's changed because we have now ordered the results in numerical order. So you'll notice the results rate go from 2 down to 9. So to calculate the median in this case, we're going to look at the two central values, and in this case it's 4 and 5. We're going to add these two together. So 4 plus 5. We're going to divide them by 2, and that gives us 4.5. So our median in this case is 4.5. Now what are the advantages? The first is all the learners are taken into account. The next is it's easy to work out. The only problem is it doesn't indicate trends, and it does ignore most of the results. And as a result, it's not always representative of the entire group. The third type of analysis is what we call the mode, and this shows tendency. So this is worked out by placing all the results in numerical order and select the most frequently occurring result. So again, we've got the same breakdown. Remember in the last one, in the median, we also put them in order of results. But here what we look at is which result occurs the most frequently. So in this case, there are 2 learners that got 2, and every other result was only 1 learner. So therefore the mode in this case is 2. So there are 3 clear advantages of using the mode. The first is that it's not affected by a few extreme results. The second, it's easy to work out. And the third, it's often useful where the other measures are meaningless. But there are also disadvantages. The first is it doesn't indicate overall trends. It ignores most of the results. And it's not representative of all the results in most cases. A change in one result can mean a change in the mode. And the other thing is there's not always a mode. So you need to bear these in mind if you're going to use the mode. Now, the next method is what we call the range. And the range is the difference between the highest and lowest result. So this is worked out simply by subtracting the lowest result from the highest result. So again, we've got our same 6 learners. Once again, they are in order or numerical order of their results. So the 2 at the bottom as the lowest and the 9 at the top. And all we're doing with the range is we're taking the 9, which is the highest result, subtract the 2, which is the lowest result, and that gives you a range of 7. So you can have a looking back on all 4 of these methods that we've just looked at. Each of them give a different result. So you've got to be quite specific and clear about what you want to know about the results and what are you going to do with the results before you choose on which method to use. So the advantages of the range, there are 2 clear advantages. The first is it indicates whether the results are appropriately spread out. The second, it's very easy to work out. And of course, the third, the fact that it's simple to work out. Often this simple method doesn't take into account the results that could have been rounded up. And there are other methods that you can use to avoid this, but you need to remember this and take it into consideration when using the range. And the next type of analysis that you can use, or tool that you can use, is what we call normal distribution. And this is a bell-shaped curve where a number of results are plotted on this curve, which you can now use as a benchmark to establish trends and measurements. Now, if you have a look at this curve, there are 3 sections to it. They're the low performers, they're the average performers, and they're high performers. Along the left-hand side is your number of learners. So going up the x-axis is your number of learners, and across the y-axis are the results obtained. And if we have a look in the middle, there's the mean. Now, what this graph actually tells us, or that this curve tells us, is there are as many learners below the mean as there are above the mean. And what we use this graph for is to plot other trends against it, to be able to see where are the trends not following according to this pattern. And this pattern tells us that between 0 and 100% in terms of results, that's where 100% of the learners sit, which is pretty obvious. 96% of the learners should sit between 15 and 85%. So what that's saying is you're still going to have some learners below 15% and still going to have some learners above 85%. And then, of course, in the middle, our average performers, 68% of our learners should sit between 35 and 65%. Now, of course, this is a trend. It's not exact, but it's a very good measure of where our results should sit. And the idea of the normal distribution is to use this as a method to plot our own results against it. So let's have a look at some of the advantages. And in the next module, you're going to look in detail at how do we use normal distribution as a tool to analyze data. So the advantages, well, the first is it indicates trends. And if you remember, most of the other methods don't indicate trends. The second is it uses all of the results. Once again, most of the others don't use all the results. It provides an instant graphic feedback for improvement. So you can visually see straight away where your errors are and where you need to improve. It also describes the spread of results in a precise way. So you're using all the results and you can see in a precise way where the pitfalls are. There are, of course, also disadvantages. The first is it's difficult to work out. And as I said, we'll do that in the next module and look at how do you work it out. But it does take time to work out. It also takes knowledge, skills, and experience to interpret this graph. So looking at normal distribution, you need to have the skills to interpret it. And hopefully in this course, by the end of it, you will have these skills. Now, a normal distribution has a number of characteristics. And it's essential that we remember these characteristics when using it to analyze data. Now, the first is that there are as many results below the mean as above it. So if you have a look at the means in the middle, to the left, the green arrow, and to the right, the blue arrow, the number of learners or the number of learners performing in that bracket is the same. The next is to note that most of the results cluster around the mean in the middle. So about 65%, more or less, of learners should be achieving in that range. And then, of course, the third characteristic to take note of is there are fewer scores as you move away from the mean in both directions. So as you get the lower the results, there should be less learners achieving low results. The highest results, there should be fewer learners achieving the high results. Once again, most of the learners should be clustered around the mean. So hopefully this has given you an idea of the different ways and the different methods that you can use to draw different conclusions. And hopefully it's also shown you that we tend to use the mean in most of our analysis in schools. We tend to find the average, and the average is so limited when we are looking to improve and analyze our results effectively. So in the next couple of videos, you're going to learn about how do you use normal distribution to actually evaluate trends and look at how do you use this with the view of improving.